Day 3, RFS Fluid Links Advent Calendar. Here we go. Peripheral Intelligence Agency.
That's a good name.
I know. At yet another John, Jon. I don't know if there's more JOHNs than JONs, but anyway, here's the question.
John was
John, that's true, he was. What do you it says what do think, but I'll assume that's what do you think is the correct TL timeline. Oh, this is all gonna be in shorthand, isn't it? For Dalek stories from the Daleks' perspective, if Genesis was first, when does Evil of the Daleks come, and so on? So basically, put all the Dalek stories in order.
I'm checking out of this one right now because I have no idea. The Daleks have no idea. How many times has Skaro been blown up? Twice at least.
3 times? Well, once in the Time War, once in Remembrance.
Yeah, and there's one other time, maybe?
Probably.
But then they show up on Skaro again in what's Medingy?
Magician's Apprentice. Yeah.
Even though there's Daleks from all over the timeline there. The Daleks can travel through time, so they scrambled it themselves, basically.
That is so... And they never, say, oh, you are the Doctor. You are, in fact, the 6th incarnation. They always sort of say, it's the Doctor. We don't like you. They never, discriminate as to which one they're talking to.
The Cybermen have mentioned that he's changed his appearance, though.
Oh, the Cybermen notice these things because, listen, Daleks, the Doctor puts effort into his or her appearance, and you not noticing is really the greatest crime of them all.
Yeah, Colin Baker's hair doesn't get that outlandish, by happenstance.
No, exactly. So that throws
Even
a whole...
Davros remarks on that every once in a while. He's like, oh, you've changed your appearance again, Doctor.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. Now I'm in a tank or whatever the hell he's doing.
That's true. But he could be referring to whatever regeneration. Like he just happens to see, the one that Davros saw before Revelation of the Daleks could very well have been Hartnell or someone, or maybe not Hartnell because he never met. But then again, the Doctor travels in time, so maybe he will have met. It's crazy. This is tough.
See, though the easier, and easier is in quotes here, the way to do it is to go with Davros's timeline, because he's at the start, and so you can guess that the Magician's Apprentice, etc., that's the end?
Is it, though?
Timeline?
Is it?
But it's the beginning because he meets the Doctor as a kid.
Yeah. So there, you got to put individual
This
scenes.
is a fool's errand. I can't possibly.
Oh, it's very difficult.
What doesn't fit now?
What doesn't fit?
Asylum?
The chase, because it's crap.
Yeah, that's the only reason. It just sucks.
Chase is terrible.
The random ones like Death of the Daleks are basically impossible to slot in.
Because that means Destiny must be pretty early on, because it's essentially right after Genesis, more or less, 800 years later. But it's a sequel to that story, right?
Yeah, Destiny's a while after Genesis, because
it's a while chronologically, but it's in terms of lining up the stories, it's the next one. You know what I mean?
I think you have to find out what the Movellan history is, and then, to paraphrase City of Death, work backwards to find out where you're going.
And then the first Bill episode, the Movellan show up, so it gets really confusing.
That's true. Is it the same Movellan War? I mean, God, who knows?
Yeah.
This is really tough. This is why we have production codes, all right? This is why. We just sort of
And by the way, much as there's debate to be had on whether you should have old monsters or not in the new series.
Yeah.
The fact that the Movellans showed up, much as I thought it was cool, is kind of an indicator that they were diving pretty deep for the old monsters.
That's all right. They just were fighting someone, and I thought, well, if they're going to fight someone...
it was a nice little cameo and all, but it did indicate that they were kind of leaning in the other direction pretty hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the Movellans are the canary in the coal mine, and I think instead of focusing on the Daleks timeline, I think we have to look at where the Movellans are and where they are at the end of all this. And
don't forget we have the dolls and the Thals, and they don't even, that gets all screwed up too.
That's true. They go from blonde people wearing strange costumes to blonde people wearing astronaut costumes. Yeah, in Planet of the Daleks, and then they look different in. This is tough.
In Genesis, yeah.
Never try to come up with the correct timeline for anything. You will just do your head in, as we have done here.
It's bad enough with Star Wars, and there's only however many movies, 10, 11, 12.
I forget already.
Do you think Planet of the Daleks comes before or after the very first Dalek story?
After?
After. Right? But maybe not. But there's Thals, though. But then again, they had ships, and they didn't have... Man.
But
confusing.
the first Dalek story is by virtue of being the first Dalek story, it's there's a lot of stuff that was never thought of for what could come after.
Right.
As much as anything, the thought was to maybe never have anything come after for the Daleks.
Mm-hmm.
But the impression given, or the impression I get, is the Daleks and the Thals, since the war, basically had been, doing their own things. Which Planet of the Daleks, if it comes before the Daleks, the mutants, whatever, that would throw that out the window.
What?
That would break canon, but the Daleks are supposed to be completely dead at the end of the Dead Planet.
Let's also not forget. No, actually, Stephen, you've been aching to say something, so you say it first.
Well, I mean, what if that war? This is getting heavy, folks. What if that war that they mentioned in the very first story, the Daleks, is actually a different Dalek-Thal war that just happens like thousands of years in the future, that they've already forgotten their history, and that's why they're called Dals as opposed to Kaleds and stuff, because it's evolved over the time. So actually the very first Dalek story is in fact the last Dalek story.
Well, here's the other thing. Doctor Who couldn't care less about its own continuity. No. It never has. No. So I mean, let's not Star Trek this up too hard.
Neither did Terry Nation care either. Really.
True.
No.
Where's my check? That was, I believe, what he said.
He cared when he got the money.